a money fight, I get you, and you want to make money. But at some point in time, if you keep telling us that you're taking boxing seriously and you want to be recognized as a big-time box/fighter, you're going to have to fight somebody closer to your age who is a contender at the very least.
Jake Paul fight announcement, another circus act, another clown show. A fight between Jake Paul and Gervonta Tank Davis has been announced as an exhibition fight.
A fight that I couldn't believe, that was too insane and honestly just baffling to think would be a real fight in 2025. Reminds you that combat sports are the craziest sports on the planet.
Stephen A. Smith responded forcefully to the announcement of Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis, denouncing it as a mere circus. While he gave Jake credit for his self-promotion skills and ability to turn fights into big spectacles, Smith argued that boxing deserves more respect. In his view, Paul should be stepping in the ring with opponents that make sense competitively, not just chasing shock value. For Smith, this matchup is the latest example of entertainment taking priority over genuine competition.
I've always been a fan of Jake because I think that what Jake tries to do for the sport of boxing, I think people don't realize the importance of him being able to promote for himself and not being reliant on the promoters who I believe has held the sport hostage. The only critique I've ever given Jake, I just want Jake to fight boxers. Like Nate Diaz, we know his reputation. We know the man can fight. We know in the octagon he could be something special. But we know you breathe on him, he starts bleeding.
It's a fair critique. And you know what? He should fight boxers. But then again, should he? Because I'll tell you why. If you're a human who can rake in $6 to $10 million fighting people that you know you're going to beat, you want to build a resume and a record that's impressive with a good highlight reel, you got to be strategic about this shit. Jake's 25, 26, he's got so much time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I get where you're coming from. All I'm saying is, we don't know your skill set because you haven't been in there with anybody really skilled.
Analysts say Jake Paul's latest matchup is yet another circus act in his boxing career. They argue that most of his fights lack true competitive balance or logical matchmaking, built more for attention than credibility. Instead of challenging opponents who align with his weight class or skill level, Paul keeps pursuing odd, spectacle-driven bouts. To many experts, this strategy may deliver entertainment, but it undermines boxing as a serious sport.
Jake Paul won the fight. But yeah, that was that. This time, Jake Paul is to take on Tank Davis. Tank Davis, he was recently in the news for being arrested for a domestic violence incident involving one of his kids' mother. He was alleged to have slapped her about the place. Charges were later dropped, to be fair to him. But yeah, that was when he was last in the news. What is interesting is just a couple of months ago, Tank Davis was saying openly that he lost his passion for boxing and that he wanted time away from the sport. There was speculation that he might even retire because he was experienced extreme mental fatigue from boxing, depression, and there were mental health concerns over it. However, I guess the opportunity to earn a truck full of money fighting a completely worthless exhibition fight against Jake Paul was enough to make him change his mind about boxing. Funny that, isn't it? But you know what? I'm not even going to waste your time on my critiquing this utter nonsense. Suffice to say that this so-called fight we're talking about is an exhibition, and it puts Jake Paul, who is a cruiserweight, by the way, weighs in excess of 200 pounds. And Tank Davis, who is he was the WBA lightweight champion, who weighs in at about 135 pounds when he fights. So that's a disparity of some 65 pounds. In old money, that's about 4.5 stone. There's also a significant difference in height. Jake Paul is roughly 6'1", 2. Gervonta Davis is 5'5" best. So, the height disparity there of some 8 inches.
Ring Magazine sent shockwaves through the boxing world with its announcement. Jake Paul will face Gervonta Tank Davis on November 14th at State Farm Arena in Atlanta. The bout, confirmed by reporter Mike Carpenter, will be an exhibition streamed live on Netflix. Talks for Paul to fight Anthony Joshua reportedly collapsed due to network conflicts, paving the way for this stunning matchup. Paul last competed at 200 pounds, while Davis reigns as a champion at 135, a massive size gap that has fans fiercely debating the fight's legitimacy, entertainment value, and what it means for the sport. Love him or hate him, Jake Paul has made it clear he's writing his own script in boxing. By investing his own money and relentlessly generating buzz, he has managed to shake up the sport in ways few thought possible. While critics dismiss his approach as a circus act, others argue that his financial power and marketing reach are pulling in new audiences. This unexpected showdown, something almost no one thought would materialize, proves just how far Paul is willing to push the boundaries of modern boxing.
Dollars that make sense, and we've seen Jake will kind of bounce in between doing these entertainment fights and then, trying to push toward his goal of ingraining himself in the sport of boxing, and kind of does both of them. So it's kind of a weird place to be, because he wants the respect of the boxing fans and the boxing hierarchy and hardcore boxing people, but at the same time, he'll gain some of that and then lose some of it. It's like a seesaw of his fights. Like one fight, like, okay, that's a real fight, or that's a real fight. He'll go and he'll win the fight. Julio Cesar Chavez, real fighter, maybe past his prime, whatever, but Jake goes and wins that fight pretty easily, and then gets a lot of respect, gets a lot of the boxing hardcore love. And you have these talks about him fighting Anthony Joshua, and that was going to get even more respect. More people were like, that's fucking crazy. What are you doing? Myself included. That seemed like a massive risk, but a lot of people were like, okay, fair play. Anthony Joshua, that's a real heavyweight. Jake wants to fight him. He's a psycho, but fair play. And then you announce this one, and it's like, well, that's the same thing people have been saying about Jake for years. So it's a weird spot to be in for him, for sure. But I talked about this not being the first choice, and I don't think it was, because Coppinger reports next that talks for Jake Paul to face Anthony Joshua collapsed over network issues. Now, we had all heard the talks, and they were pretty public, from Eddie Hearn, from Jake. Nakisa Badarian, Jake's manager, was over in the UK on, I think, Sky Sports, talking about the fight and saying how it was a real possibility and they were really starting to work on it. And now Mike Coppinger says that the talks for Jake and Joshua fell apart over broadcasting issues.
Jake Paul later confirmed the fight himself on Instagram, posting, "Size versus speed, power versus precision. One will rise and one will fall from Atlanta. Live globally, only on Netflix, Friday, November 14th. His words immediately amplified the buzz, turning the exhibition into one of the most talked about events worldwide. Boxing analyst Teddy Atlas, one of the sport's most respected voices, weighed in on Paul's rise and the sacrifices behind it. According to Atlas, love him or hate him, Jake Paul deserves credit for securing the fights he wants, something that doesn't simply happen. It takes persistence, financial risk, and a willingness to sacrifice comfort for the spotlight. Atlas noted that Paul has carved out a lane in boxing few ever imagined possible for a YouTuber-turned-fighter. Beyond the spectacle, he argues, there's real improvement. Paul has spent years training under elite coaches, sparring with professionals, and learning to truly hold his own in the ring. While purists may mock him, Atlas believes much of the criticism overlooks the effort, investment, and progress Paul has made. For Atlas, Jake Paul's journey isn't just about controversy, it's proof of how far determination and relentless commitment can carry someone, even in a sport as unforgiving as boxing.
That I gave too much credit to Paul. Why? He's done a hell of a job to put himself in this position. He sold himself, he sold his dream, he took his dream, he took his idea, and he put it out there, and he made it happen. Give him credit for that. And he made it happen. And he took risk along the way. Yeah, he picked his spots. He's in the driver's seat. He gets to pick his spots. He's the one bringing the money. He's the one promoting. Yeah, he's the name. He made himself that, coming from where he came from, with all his followers and the whole thing, and just the uniqueness of what he was doing. But he has learned along the way. He's not a top guy yet. No, I don't know that he ever will be. He didn't have that amateur background and the things that you usually need to be a top guy. But he has improved. He is a work in progress. He is a guy that you got to give him credit that he's respected the sport. He went out there, he's worked hard at it, and he's gotten himself into this position. Having said all of that, this might be a step too far. Now, when I say it, I try to be responsible. I've been in this game 50 years, so I know where not to step, where you can twist an ankle, or worse, you could break a leg or fall down. When I say that with the understanding too that Joshua's coming off being knocked out.
The team at TalkSport reacted sharply to the announcement of Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis, calling it a wildly unbalanced matchup. Their biggest concern: the glaring weight disparity. Davis, a natural 135-pound lightweight known for his knockout power, has dominated his division, but stepping into the ring against Paul, who walks around near 195 pounds, feels completely unrealistic to them. The question is simple: how can this fight be considered fair or meaningful with such an extreme size difference? This reaction underscores a familiar criticism of Paul's matchmaking. Time and again, he's accused of targeting opponents who are either much smaller, past their prime, or even from outside the sport altogether. In this case, Davis may be in his prime, but the size gap makes the matchup just as controversial.
And that's probably where the problem was. So I think that fight is sort of like dead and buried in the water. And we get Gervonta Davis, man, like you guys said it. He's a 135-pound world champion, lightweight world champion. Guy's my height, 5'5", and Jake Paul is a cruiserweight. You know, he walks around at sort of like 15 stone. So, and it's an exhibition. So, look, if you buy into that, then yeah, fine. But it's not one for me.
Spence, let me ask you this: if you were European champion, right?
Yes.
Before you had to retire, so that you were European champion. If you were, how tall are you? What are you at? 4'8", 4'9"?
5'5".
5'5". Okay. If you were in your pomp at European champion and you were 5'5" and you were fighting Jake Paul, would you fancy your chances?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, definitely. I think I fancy my chances. I think Gervonta Davis actually beats him as well. He's one of the pound-for-pound best fighters in the world at lightweight. But it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? It's like you got a guy of 5'5" boxing a guy of 6 foot plus. Cruiserweight, yeah, it's just all a little bit odd. I feel if they're going to do an exhibition, perhaps Jake should have picked someone more his size. Look, his last fight against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Was at cruiserweight. Chavez Jr. was a former world champion at middleweight himself. And that sort of made sense, and it was a good win for Jake Paul. You know, he come out there and he beats an ex-world champion and gets a little bit of credibility, and he goes, right, now you're heading in the right direction.
Analysts at Boxing Scene argued that the matchup is a no-win situation for Gervonta Davis. Despite being the smaller man, Davis brings an undefeated record and a reputation for explosive knockout power. But taking on a much larger opponent puts him in a difficult position. If Davis loses, critics will dismiss it as a size mismatch. And if he wins, detractors may still claim the victory means little because Jake Paul isn't considered an elite boxer.
Win for Gervonta as much as it is for Jake. Jake, it's like, okay, you're fighting a former world lightweight champion. You're bigger, so you have some advantages, even if you're, at a severe skill disadvantage. You're not supposed to expect to do anything, but if you do, it's even, it's bananas for you. It's great. Gervonta, I don't know, what if Jake hits him? Jake's a big guy. I don't know if Gervonta stood next to Jake. Jake's a big guy.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
And Gervonta, small even by lightweight standards.
Right.
So it is a little bit of a David and Goliath fight. It's just, the David character in Gervonta is much, much more skilled. But I guess that's the thought process. As far as what it does for boxing, well, absolutely nothing. But then again, what have Gervonta Davis and Jake Paul really done for boxing in the ring aspect? Because Jake, I am a believer in Jake as a promoter, and I think that he has a future as a promoter, and I think he's done very well as a promoter, and I think his company has done some very good things for the sport, and for young fighters, and for brewing talent and making good fights on that basis. But as far as from fighters' perspective, what they do for boxing from a fighter's perspective, I don't think Gervonta Davis has ever done anything for boxing, honestly. Like I feel like TV has just in this generation, they just create stars, and then they just tell you, okay, we're gonna make this guy the star. It's like they're pre-created, and then they just tell you.
Critics argue that Jake Paul's influence in boxing isn't rooted in rankings or merit, but in sheer financial power. Analysts note that his wealth and promotional reach allow him to dictate matchups, even when they defy traditional logic. The fact that he secured Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. before this fight, and now Gervonta Davis, highlights just how much control he wields. For many traditional boxing fans, these matchups feel less like true competition and more like made-for-entertainment spectacles. Some see this level of influence as harmful to the sport's integrity, as it bypasses the standard system of matchmaking, where weight classes and rankings are supposed to matter most.
Here we go again, people. Another Jake Paul fight, another embarrassing night for boxing. Said this a few times now, really getting sick of it. 10 rounds of tediousness, whereby Jake Paul was just say throwing punches, a lot of them didn't have any zip on them against an opponent that was just compliant. He holds boxing in contempt. It's basically keeping the sport. That's what Jake Paul is doing. And I find it unacceptable. I really do. The whole Jake Paul brand is actually bad for boxing. Taking advantage of the sport, fighting washed up MMA fighters, former fighters, and now we're hearing that he's about to enter the WBA ranking, be in line for a world title shot. Absolute farce. Couldn't get away with it in any other sport, and that's what makes me so mad.